Hello, beautiful. You are listening to episode 93 of the Africana Woman Podcast. Take note, this is part 2. Chulu is my name. I am a writer, personal brand consultant, entrepreneur, and mentor. This show is the home of African women's stories. We share ideas, triumphs, challenges, and lessons from our perspective as women. Our library is a step to cementing our place in history. Her story, your story, is powerful. Thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome to all the new listeners. Welcome back to my OG listeners. Guys, I love you. Now, click the subscribe button to make sure that you're always the first to know when a new episode drops, and tell at least one girlfriend today about the Africana Woman Podcast. Click that share button. Let's get people knowing about the podcast. We are 6 conversations away from the official 100th episode celebration. On Saturday, 24th September, Africana women shall descend upon Kabwe for a live podcast recording. There is accommodation for the ladies coming from out of town. Think lights, cameras, action. There's a song from Sarafina. It's a saying, smile for the camera, flesh. Oh, goodness. Okay, so think lights, cameras, fashion, interviews, networking, good food. I cannot wait. So you can still grab your tickets. Just go to africanawoman.com and find the events section. All right, part 2. Today, we have a double play with my podcast sister, More Sibyl. Listen, we're podcasters. We love to talk. Is it a surprise that this is a double play? Now, I was debating whether to split up the conversation, but I think it makes sense. Everything about this conversation is so profound. It's called an interview, but really I was just a witness to a beautiful soul pouring out her wisdom. And it is a great privilege that I could be present for this. Pull out your tissue. It's a tearjerker. And I'm not going to say much more than that. Let's touch base afterwards. Here is More Sibyl. All right, let's talk about your support system and your family, your beautiful family. So when did you meet your husband? Was that in Nigeria or in the States?
In Nigeria, yeah. I mean, all this, you know how you watch Korean dramas, all the tropes you have in colleges, yeah. We met in college, straightforward from there, yeah. Yeah.
And what is
my shoe? There was a shoe involved, so it's very cheesy. If I talk about it, it sounds like a poorly scripted movie. But yeah, men in college, there was a missing shoe, and the rest, as I say, is history.
Oh wow! And you got married in Nigeria, or
yes,
before you came?
So I met him in 2004. Actually, 2003, 2004. And then we started dating 2 years after then, 2006. We dated for about 5 years, and then we got married in 2011. So got married in June and then moved here in August. So I was a student bride, like I like to say.
Wow.
So I moved straight for my PhD, yeah. So.
Oh, wow. And then what was he doing?
So he's a physician, right? I went to University of Lagos. We went on the medical campus. I was studying pharmacy. He was studying medicine. So when he came here, the plan was for him to write his board exams and start practicing. But that took a little bit of a while because, again, if you don't have a green card and was just starting out, he applied, got some interviews, but he didn't match. And then he went to do his master's in public health and then finally matched. He did his residency. Now he works as a hospitalist. So we both live in Oklahoma. He works as a hospitalist here in one of the hospitals here, and I work at the University of Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
wow. So you got married in 2011. So that's like,
yes.
Girl, please help me with the math. 11
years. Don't worry. 11 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. And in those 11 years, what was your I guess, what was your expectation? What was your biggest hope for marriage?
Okay. I didn't want to get married.
Wow.
FYI, even as a child growing up, how girls talk about their biggest day being their wedding day when you feel those slum books and autographs. Now, I never pictured myself walking down the aisle doing the penguin dance with the white dress. That wasn't my dream. I had two dreams growing up. I wanted to adopt a child, and I wanted to go to France, get my PhD, and then go to culinary school on the side. Those were my dreams.
That's all right.
I never wanted to get married. I know.
How did you get like the culinary school? And
I like cooking, and I wanted to learn more about. I mean, my cooking skills I didn't go to school. It was just inherent, because I think being a pharmacist, you're used to sticking to ingredients and, formulations and chemicals and all that. And I think it just came naturally. Give me a recipe, I'll cook it. I will make it, you'll love it. But I wanted to learn more about the science, behind cooking, especially baking, because I sucked at baking. I still suck at baking, but cooking, you cannot beat me in there. And so when I met him, I just told him, I never want to get married. And, of course he started liking me, and I could tell that. And the first time he asked me to go out with him, he said, I don't want to just date you. I want to marry you. And I remember just laughing in his face, like, marry, like, haven't you been hearing all the things I've been telling? Because we're friends, Again, I was learning French then, and his sister lived in Paris then. And so he would bring books, and then I was going to French school during the summer. And so I would come back and teach him what I learned. And so we had a friendship going. And then so when he asked me out and said he wanted to marry me, I was like, no, like, I know for sure I'm not going to get married, but let me think about dating you. Cause I used to tell him that I hated guys that you're friends with who now want to date you because it kind of messes up with the friendship. But he was a kind of different breed in the sense that, he completes my craziness in a way. Like he's more stable emotionally, and I use that very carefully. And he's more grounded in himself. He's a very strong man, but he's also, there has a tenderness to him. He's very mindful. And I thought to myself, if I would do this whole married thing with somebody, it has to be with him, and he comes from a very good family, like as well as I do. And we just got it going. But I'll tell you that being married was a totally different game, because I remember telling him then, let's just try for 5 years and see how it goes. Those were my exact words to that. You could tell that I had no idea what I was talking about. And he goes, don't worry, I'm not going to make you regret it. I'll make sure you have the best time of your life. And it's been 11 years, and I'll say he's done a fantastic job. I think one of the reasons we are still married is because of him, because I've given up in my mind many times, because I'm like, okay, I'm tired. I want out, time out. He goes, where are you going? Come back here, And he's done a lot of work, and I've had to learn to put in the work. I remember the first year of marriage, which was one of the hardest. He would say things like, I chose to love you. Like, I'm choosing to love you. And I go, like, choosing to love. Oh, like a dog you rescued from the pounds, right? Like, you're just choosing. You have that, man, God, I was a hot mess, so bless God for that, man. And friends that know us, they know that, we kind of complement each other. I'm the crazy one, and he's like the cool one. But now things are changing. He's now more adventurous, and I'm like retiring now that I have a daughter. Like, I'm being more careful because I realize I only have one life, so I don't do crazy things as much as I used to before. But I would say what I really hoped was just to be happy. And not when I say happy, it was very important for me to have purpose. I just didn't want to be a wife. That could not be my identity. And I'm someone that you cannot cage. I needed that freedom. Now, when I talk about freedom, not freedom and that flippancy to go do things you're not supposed to do, I wanted to explore my talents because I have a lot of gifts. And I thought to myself, marriage was going to tie you down. That was my fear. Because as a Nigerian, or even an African, which I think you can relate to, you have all these box ticked for you the moment you came out of your mother's hoo-ha, go to school, but don't be too ambitious. Find a nice man who can marry you. But before then, learn how to cook, clean, and have great sex. Even though you were not taught anything about sex, but all of a sudden you're supposed to unleash all of these, unhidden talents. And so I'm like, I don't want a part of this. How about that? Let me just find my own path. And I remember always telling my mom, I'm not going to get married. I'm going to adopt a child. As a child, she would just look at me and say, I rebuke it for you in Jesus' name. Like, she will pray over me. So I would say, I have my PhD. I haven't gone to cooking school yet, but I'm not taking that off. I have a child who I adopted, but it's been a lot of work. We've had to put in a lot of work. I mean, marriage counseling, therapy, individual therapy, because you realize that your broken parts, even though things that happened to you as a child, you think is happening to you, but your spouse can also take a brunt of that. And knowing how to function as an individual, because you're only as strong as you're strong individually. So I've had to be in therapy to work on myself, and he's had to work on himself as well. But I knew that there were so many things I brought into the marriage that and I'm speaking for myself. I'm sure if he were here, he would speak about himself. I mean, he's not perfect by any means, but it's about doing the work. And that can be quite hard because you're sitting in front of somebody and telling them in the hurt you had as a child and owning up to the things you've done and just how messy and complicated things can be. But it's been worth it, you know. Year 10 was good. And then after year 10, we went through a crisis that, you know, it's just by the grace of God, we're still married. But I think it's just two people doing the work. And so 11 years, I'm thankful for my husband because he's never held me back. You don't really see him. You don't hear it because he's not really on social media. I'm the loudest one in the family. But he's like my number 2 cheerleader. My mom is my number 1. I'm sure the only reason she's my number 1 is because she gave birth to me and she was there first. But my husband comes as a very close second. Everything I do, he encourages it. And I think that's kind of rare, especially in our men. But I'm seeing a lot of that changing now. Even when I go like, you know what, I don't want to, he's like, no, you can do it. You can do it. He supports me in everything I do. And I'm glad I have that kind of person. And I'm glad I married him because I'm doing more. There's more bang for my buck right now. You know how the Bible says one shouting, chase 1,000. I mean, he's made me into a great woman. And I have that confidence, you know, in him, knowing that he supports my dreams. And I'm so, so thankful for him. And even though he can't be in places that I am because just of the way his personality is wired. But he'll tell me, go, I'm behind you. I'm here solidly for you. And that it's actually way better than I expected. Way, way better. And I didn't give him enough credit for it. So baby, if you ever listen to this, thank you so much. So yeah.
Oh,
sorry, I can.
I don't rebuke you like your mother. You will not make So, okay. So you wanted to adopt, but did he have those dreams? Because you had those dreams when you were young. So what happened?
So I was very clear before we started dating what I wanted. And so he's a twin. My husband's twin, so they're number one, they're fraternal. And they could not look anything, you know, alike. They look like brothers, but his twin is a crazier version of me. And that's saying something. So when he told his twin about me, his twin said, run away from that girl. She's crazy. And I still chuckled to today because he was spot on. But you know how they say opposites attract? I'm like, why? You like running to a burning building like this one right here. She's a hot mess. And so he thought everything I told him was like a child's play. Like, oh yeah, she just had this, you know, tall dreams. She'll be fine. But I was really serious about the adoption. Like I made a vow to God I was going to adopt, but I really didn't know how it was going to be. I didn't know how it was going to come about, but I knew I wanted to do it. So when we got married, my plan was to, you know how you just say, you know, I'm going to take 2 years, but we're debating. It was like 1 year. I'm like, no, 2 years because I'm going to be in grad school. I don't want to start popping babies I can't take care of. And again, my mom was working while she gave birth to me. So she was not really around for like about the first 8 years of my life. And that really impacted me a lot, you know, abandonment issues. I mean, we're good now, but my fear is work is just going to overtake my life. And I didn't want that, you know, as a parent. And so when we did the whole thing, okay, so we finally came to 1.5. It was like meeting halfway. He wanted 1 year. I wanted 2 years. And then 1 year into the marriage, I started having some symptoms, which were, before then, about 2 years while I was in Chevron, while I was working there, I had to go through emergency surgery. I had an ovarian cyst. So the cyst had kind of torsioned around my right ovaries. I also found some dermoid cysts on my left ovaries. Anyways, I had a C-section done, a laparotomy. They took out the cyst. And the warning was like, get married right away. And so you can start having kids because, you know, we saved your ovaries are good, but you need to, because they will come back. And you don't believe that this guy proposed to me not too long after. I'm like, heck no, I'm not going to marry because of my ovaries. Like how, like he was like, no, let's just go ahead. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this. And my mom was like, why? I'm like, no. So I waited 2 years because I wanted it to be something I wanted to do. And as at that time, I could have just gone on dating, but because I knew I was coming to the US, And I'm like, are you coming with me or not? Because I ain't doing long distance relationship. That's not me. Out of sight, out of mind. Hasta la vista, baby. So I think even getting married then was the motto of let's just do it because, it's either now or never. So, of course, I knew that coming into the marriage, I had that ovarian cyst issue. I mean, even though I was physically okay up until that time. But anyways, the cyst had come back and this time around it had ruptured. So I started retaining fluid around my abdomen, my pelvic region. I had to go through laparoscopies. They drain the fluid, but it's like a vacuum. It keeps filling back up. Every time you have your cycle and you shed your endometrial layer, I mean, it was just always coming back. So I had several surgeries. And of course, conception was going to be quite difficult, almost going to take a miracle. Because Chilo, your mom, 3 things have to happen. There has to be a sperm strong enough to swim, and there has to be an egg to meet with the sperm, and then your innards has to be lined up enough for it to be able to host those egg and the sperm, the embryo as well. So something was just not matching because his sperm is fantastic. We did all the tests. I was ovulating like crazy, but then the ovum as well was not conducive enough because I kept, having a lot of fluid, which was irritating the pregnancies. So went through IVF route, and I was 25 when I had my first IVF, and so it broke me. It broke me so much because this was a part of my life I didn't see coming, right? In a strange land with this sophisticated healthcare system, so impersonalized. And I'm like, I'm 25. And they look at you like, you're still young. So the first time I did my stimulation, so IVF has 2 cycles, 2 portions of it. There's a stimulation and there's an implantation. Stimulation is when they take your eggs, they mix with your husband's sperm, and then they put it in they incubate it for a while, culture, whatever, to see how it grows and if it's stronger. The first time I did my stimulation, I had 17 eggs. And by the time they, looked at the ones that were the better grades, we came down with I think 9 at the end of the day. And so the first cycle, because of guidelines, I was at less than 30. They implanted 1. I didn't get pregnant. I remember when they called me, I was on the bus to go to school to do my teaching assistant job. And I was wailing in the bus just to show you how American can be funny. There are people in the bus, but nobody came to meet me to say it. And it wasn't like a silent cry. I was wailing. Like you could hear, unless you were deaf. And my husband wasn't home then. He was in school. He was in College Station, which was like 2 hours away. So I was by myself. No one to even give me a hug and no one to even really talk to. And then the second time around, after that happened, I went back to my doctor, was like, maybe it could be the fluids. So I had to go to that surgery again. This time around, a cancer specialist did the surgery because, to remove all the scar tissues and drain everything. And then I got pregnant with twins. This was 2014. And then at the 7-week mark, I had a miscarriage. It was a Saturday and I started spotting. And usually have a number, you page the nurse. And I told her, hey, is this normal? She's like, yeah, multiple pregnancies that can happen, but to rest. I was like, okay, sure. And I started having contractions. I'm like, this is not normal. You know how almost like you want to pee, but you're holding it. But this time around, your body's telling you, no, this has to go out. And you're closing your legs together. You're contracting your muscles. Like, no, you have to stay. Man, chill. I couldn't hold it. I just went to the restroom and the amount of blood that came out of me, I thought I was going to pass out. Like, there's no way. Like, where's this blood coming from? And I lost the pregnancy. It was a full evacuation. So by the time I went it was a Saturday. I went on Monday. And it wasn't an emergency, so I couldn't go to the ER. Again, it shows you just how the healthcare system here is. I had to wait until Monday and they did a scan. It was a full evacuation. Sure. And my mom, I got my master's that year, right? My mom was already scheduled to come celebrate my master's and stay with us until we had the baby. I was a shell of myself. There was so much going on. I had if you look through my master's picture, my face was puffy. I was really chubby because I just lost the pregnancy. My boobs were really huge. And I've never been quite depressed. Like I went to the deepest pits of hell. Because I couldn't grieve about it. My mom came, I had a picture, ultrasound, scan that was done before we lost the pregnancy. It was in my room. She was like, take it down. She just, how moms they don't want to see you in pain, but it felt rushed. And I guess that was her protecting her daughter. Like, I don't want you to be sad, but I needed that time for myself, because from May to December, I was like a zombie. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I even got an internship in Boston to work for a biotech firm. I was doing all the things I'm supposed to do. I was moving great in my career, but I felt like a failure, like a biological failure. And it was December 31st, up until the overnight, like New Year's Eve. My friend came visiting and they wanted to go for like service overnight. And I told my husband, no, I just want to stay home. I needed to like battle this grief because I had engraved. And this was when the Hobbit song came out, Bid You Goodbye. That song was healing for me because I listened to the lyrics and I started crying, and I let out a cry. I've not been able to replicate that sound ever, and I hope never to. It sounded like a call of the wild, like when an animal loses their child, like their offspring, and that cry of pain, like it was animalistic. It was a groan. It was so loud. It was guttural. And that was when I felt like the dam broke, and I cried. I was shaking visibly. And that's when it dawned on me, like, this is what grief is. And from 2014 to 2019, 2020, around December, because December was my due date, and Christmas is one of my favorite times of the year, but around December, there's this chronic depression that would just come from nowhere. And it was because my body kept remembering, even when I didn't remember why I was sad. So I'm about to work on that. So we tried again in 2015, didn't get pregnant. So I told my husband, I'm done, like, I need a break. I was in grad school. IVF takes a lot from me, physical, mental, emotional. You're jabbing yourself with all the steroids and hormones. I was putting on a lot of weight. There was nothing to show for it. People just, oh, you're putting on weight. So I ate all the burgers in America. I was going through a lot, y'all. Like, the weight I was putting was through the IVF, and my metabolism just got jacked up. And I come from, my dad's side of the family, they're big people. So I already have that, risk factor. And then with these IVF issues and all, and being in grad school and, my husband trying to get a job, it was just so much going on. And then you start looking at your friends who have kids on, naturally and without any form of issues. And you're like, man, why me? And the fact that I didn't even want this initially, and now that it's something I want, I'm not even getting it. And up until that time, I was always a straight arrow. Like, everything I did was excellent. And this is something it wasn't for a lack of trying, right? I mean, between those times I was doing surgeries, I've had maybe like more than 10 surgeries in total between 2009 and 2020. And so, we took a break, and he was like, yeah, I think you should take a break. Cause I wasn't myself anymore. And sex became just like, let's time it. It wasn't fun anymore. It was almost like, oh, let's time it. Imagine you just having sex with your spouse because you want them to get you pregnant. Where's the romance? Talk about taking out the romance out of the room, right? And then we took a 3-year break. We tried again in 2018. And then I got pregnant. And I was like, yay. And I had a work trip to Ireland. And I slept in the afternoon because when I'm pregnant, I sleep a lot, which I don't normally do. I woke up in my hotel room and I saw blood on my white bedsheet. And I'm like, dang it, not again. So I called the nurse. She was like, just relax. I know what's going to happen. Lo and behold, somewhere in the septic tank in Ireland, Dublin, there's a fetus there that belongs to me because it just flushed out. And so Ireland holds some very bad memories for me because I was just by myself again. And meanwhile, all this time I've been using the frozen embryos that we stored. And it came down to the very last one. So I met another specialist. They did some tests. My endometrial receptor assay, they wanted to find out I wasn't getting enough progesterone or was something wrong with my layers weren't thick enough. They did all the tests. I did like a mock cycle, which cost a lot of money. And then they implanted the last one. I didn't even get pregnant. So that was it. I'm like, you know what? I'm done. And all this while, all this IVF surgeries was putting a lot of toll on my health. Physically, mentally, my weight, my mental health. And then all of the surgeries I was doing, the invasive natures of it was causing a decline in my air quality. And I didn't know that. And so for anyone listening to this, if you're in the beginning of your cycle and you still want to give birth and you're having surgeries around your ovaries, I highly recommend you. Doctors won't tell you this because they're not trained to do that, which is such an irony. There needs to be like a mental health a fertility counselor that goes with you every time you do all this exploration. Please consider freezing your eggs, because the most amount of eggs you have is at birth, you know. So my 3-year-old daughter right now has more eggs than she'll ever have in her lifetime. And the more you do all these surgeries and IVF, you're decreasing your egg quality and even the reserve. So by the time I went to do my test again, it was like, your egg levels are low. I'm like, geez Louise, you don't, pray tell, why not? Why are they low again? Nobody told me that I could have just frozen more eggs. So IVF is like a no-go area for me right now. And it took a while to mourn that because I gave up. But I know for my husband, it was very important for him to have a child. And he's great with kids. Kids naturally gravitate towards him. I couldn't care much about kids. When I say I like my kid. I love her to death. But I'm not like, oh, like babies. That's just not me, you know. But I wanted to do that for him because I know he's a great father and I've learned so much from him. And it was me just doing something for him, you know, and also deepening our union. But I think just the failures on my end, because it's my failure, even though he would hate me saying this way, the factor is on me. I'm the cause of why we can have kids, you know, naturally. And when you see that you're in the way of somebody that you love, not fulfilling their part as a father, there's a way it kind of messes up with you and start seeing yourself as less than. And he would never want me to talk about myself this way, but it's just the reality of what people like me go through. And I think being able to talk about it and express it has been one of the gifts therapy gave me, just acknowledging the messiness that it is. It's not from the lack of trying. So I've gotten a lot of unsolicited advice. Oh, have you tried this? Have you tried that? I'm like, honey, I have a physician husband. I'm highly educated. You think I haven't tried all those things? You know, and so when it came around 2014, I asked my husband about adoption and he looked at me like, my husband is a gentleman. You hardly hear him raise his voice. He's very stable. Like, it's just like that. The look he gave me, you'd think I was asking him for a threesome with one of his sisters. Like, it was almost like, how dare you ask about adoption? And I'd never seen him that strongly opposed about anything. So I knew that, man, you know, as a wife, there's some way you can manipulate your husband to do things you want him to do. I knew this wasn't one of those things. I had to just let it go. Like, God, I know the dream you've given me, but you got to work on this guy because this is not me. Look at the look he gave me. I could never forget it. And then fast forward 5 years later, he goes, let's try it. I'm like, try what? Out of the blue, Chul. Before then, I never said a word about it. Never said a word about it. I said, try what? He said that. I'm like, did they switch you at work? Is this Taiwan, my husband? Like, what happened to you? It's like, no, like, let's just try it. And I didn't take him seriously. I ignored him. 2 months later, let's fill this paper. I'm like, no, like, what made you change your mind? So let's just do it. So we did it. So we became excited as foster parents and went through this state, which is the DHS, the Department of Human Services. As a foster parent, your role really is, every child in the system and custody of the state is there due to a myriad of reasons. It could be neglect, trauma, abuse. Take a peek. Foster parents, your job is to be a model parent, right? It's supposed to be temporary. While the we'll call them bio parents, even though it's biological parents, but for the sake of brevity, I'll call them bio parents. Bio parents, maybe they've done something they're not supposed to do. They've abused the child, or there's drug use, or there's neglect. So a foster parent is someone that shows the biological parents almost like you're mentoring the parents. You're providing a safe space for the kids to be in, to be able to have that sense of safety, pending when the parents get their acts together. Now, depending on the circumstances, so take, for example, if you had a father or mother using drugs or there's domestic violence, the state will come up with some services, they call them, but think of them like rectifications for you to fix your acts, and they give you a timeline. If you do X, Y, Z before this, you can get your child back or your children back, right? And so the child is placed in that foster parent home, and you assume the role of the mom. but it's in a protective way. It's not like your legal custody. I mean, your temporary custody. You have the paperwork to show that this child has been placed in by the states, usually through an agency or the states. Usually it's the state, but some agencies they've been privatized for it. But we went straight to the public, the DHS state, because it was easier access. And when you're doing foster parent training, they ask you a lot of stuff. You need letters of references, how you grew up, are you in therapy, your medications you're using, they come to your house to do a home study. It's serious stuff, Chulu. And because we lived in Texas, I lived in Boston, I lived in New Mexico before I came to Oklahoma. Every state I lived in, they have to do a criminal record, a background check. They ask for our income. They ask for our parents' names, their numbers, their occupation, all of our siblings, who touched you as a kid, everything. At the point I go like, we are helping you guys. Why are you asking us all this? I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. That was like, no, we can't give up. Let's just stick it through. You have to go do a finger testing. I mean, it was just true. It took 3 months. And then you had to go through 6 weeks of intensive classes. The Holy Spirit just kept whispering to me, you cannot be proud about it. I want you to see this through. It was one of the hardest things to do because doing anything with the government is so hard, Anyways, they come for a home study. They look at your house, your rooms, your smoke alarm. You have an evacuation plan. We have a lake by front of my house. Like our property sits on a lake. So, luckily we have like a fence around. So we tell them it's going to be secured, fire extinguisher. They tested the smoke alarm. War room. We have our room. We have an upstairs and downstairs. So I had to get a baby gate so the child don't go. Anyways, all of that. Then we finally get approved. Now, what they try to do is they try to place the kids within as close as possible to where the parents are. So that way, if there's visitation, the parents don't have to drive like 2 hours to go see their children. Because even though the parents might have done something bad, they're still allowed in most cases to still have visitation rights. It could be once a week. It could be twice a week. Whatever the frequency is usually determined by the court. And then a case is built up around that. So when we started, every case we got, and I hate calling them cases, but that's just what it is a child involved. You have the paperwork. It lists you as the foster parent. It lists the child's name. It lists the caseworker, the judge. And so that paperwork is what I go with every time I have to travel out of country with the child or, maybe go to do stuff. It's always on me. Because, of course, their last name is different from my last name and my husband's last name. And so and then as you're sitting down with the caseworker to the recruiting agency to talk about your preferences, they ask you, what kind of kids would you want? For us, we're open to any race, any gender. It didn't matter, any religious creed. But we're very careful. We didn't want somebody that was 5 and above. Because again, as first-time parents, I didn't want to just jump and say I wanted a teenager. I have no idea how to deal with teens. So we wanted to build our way up. So we said 5 and under. But we could take trauma. Of course, every child in the system is traumatic. That's why they were part of their home in the first place. But we didn't want anyone that was, had a lot of medical needs because both of my husband and I have like full-time jobs and I can't stay home and start giving medications or changing, G-tubes and whatnot. So we're very specific that we didn't want maybe a child that had like, serious health issues that would necessitate them being home or needing like, wheelchair and all that. We were not equipped for that, unfortunately. So the first call we got was to show you just how unprepared I was like for a 9-month-old baby. And the caseworker, do you have a crib? I'm like, no, they're just going to sleep on the bed. Like, no, they didn't need a crib. I'm like, a crib? What is, okay. So I got a crib. And then we got another call for a 4-year-old boy. And he came home and he was a white boy. And of course I made Nigerian food. He wouldn't eat it. And I live in a neighborhood where I just this was during COVID. I sent out a message in the Facebook group like, hey, by the way, I'm a new foster mom and this boy isn't eating. What can I do? Oh, Chulu, in the next 1 hour, the front of my house had it was like, how if somebody dies, they put flowers and all. It was food, toys, shoes. At the point, I'm like, guys, stop bringing stuff. I have more, my garage right now is so full because I keep giving things away. My neighbors came out, they're like, try, mac and cheese. Of course, why did I think about mac and cheese? I gave him mac and cheese, food of his people. He ate it with so much joy. And as you know, as a parent, 4-year-old boys, they don't want to be disturbed. Just give them the food and give them the toys and get out of their way. But I was freaking out like, I hope he doesn't break a bone. But luckily for him, his auntie got custody of him, so he left. And this was for like 4 days. After the 4th day, I was like, oh, let me make you laugh. The first night he stayed with us, my husband, then I was working from home because it was during COVID, but he, being a doctor, he had to go to work. He woke me up around 7. I'm like, I looked at it, I'm like, because he knows not to wake me up, because I'm like, why are you waking up? He's like, yeah, go get ready and have your bath. I'm like, are you okay? Why are you waking me up? He was like, we have a child now, remember? I'm like, oh, shoot, of course. So I had to go shower while he watched him because I forgot to. I slept off. Just to show you just how unprepared I was. And then after the boy left, even though I stressed myself more than he stressed me, I told my husband, we're done. This is so hard. And he was like, what are you saying? You're done, kidding. So we got a call around 3 p.m. for a girl who was 11 months old. And I'm like, so they'll call you and say, hey, do you have they have a list to go through. And they're like, oh yeah, do you want to take her? I'm like, yeah, let me ask my husband, because I usually have to run things with him. At the end of the day, he would defer to me because he goes like, are you able to take care of this child? Because remember, you're the one that will be home most of the time with them. So I actually forgot to call him. And then the caseworker called me back. I said, hey, we haven't heard back from you. Are you still able to help us? So I called him, was like, yeah, sure. Do you want to? I was like, I don't know. So I told the caseworker, if you don't find anybody, sure, just come over. And around 11 p.m. too, they came in. I looked at this girl, looked her in the eye, big eyes, beautiful eyes. She started crying. In my mind, I was crying. I'm like, how am I going to keep you alive? Like, that's like the thought in my mind. And slowly, one day turned to 1 week to 2 weeks. And then you started seeing her shine through. Her smile just lit up the room. She had a nutty edge to her. And when she laughed, it was just like, it was this, she gave everything to laugh. And you started learning more about her and her story. And it started going from there, going to court, hearing about the kids, the parents, their plans, trying to work their plans. And I'm trying to be careful not to, say too much, because this would be her story to tell. And I want her to listen to the story and be proud of just how she's represented. So I can't really, say a lot about the case. But that too taught me a lot about compassion for parents who dropped the ball, for parents who, because for me it was like, you have a kid, you take care of them. That African pride, like, why can't I think of your kids? Like, but start understanding that trauma can be intergenerational. And parents can try their best, but they just can never, some might never be able to meet up that mark. And having to write the case reports and advocate for her. But for us, she was always family. Even though she was a ward of the state up until when we were able to finally adopt her, she was always family. We involved her in everything. We took her to Nigeria with us. By the time she was 2, she'd been to almost 30 countries and states and cities combined. Like, she was family. She wasn't a client, because there was no way I wasn't going to make her family. It wasn't a job to me. This was a person, and there's no way I would make a child feel like you're just a temporary placement. And I think even walking through therapy, that really helped me, because I wasn't comfortable with being called her mom. Not because I was mom, but as an African, I know blood is stronger than water. And I didn't want to usurp her mother's, her birth mother, who I wanted to keep honoring. And the therapist was like, it's okay. There can be 2 truths. That's her mom. You're also mom, Being called mom was the hardest thing, but calling her my daughter wasn't as hard as me calling myself a mom. And I think it came from that whole trauma of trying to have kids, naturally. And some people might say, well, it's only natural for you to consider adoption when you've not had kids. You've had, failures with having kids. And I want to just caution this. Adoption is not for everybody. Adoption exposed a lot of my trauma, my childhood trauma, my fertility trauma. It's almost like dousing somebody who's already on fire with more petrol. So don't think adoption is a cure for those of your friends and start suggesting or forwarding this podcast to them. If anything, I caution you, because it can break you, it can break your spouse, it can even break your marriage if you're not careful. And it took a lot of work, a lot of therapy, a lot of support, a lot of just, digging through. And who wants to expose themselves in that way, And as you can tell, my daughter looks nothing like us. She's phenotypically mixed. She doesn't look African like us, but she's very much a bit of my life and my husband's life. And by the time the opportunity came to adopt her, I should say this, but when we did the fostering, my husband was like, we're only foster parents. We don't want to adopt. Never want to adopt. We just want to be foster parents. That's what he said. And so when the opportunity came, he was so much in love because she's a daddy's girl. Like, she's dying like this. Hey, my husband can even throw all of his ATM. Like, she knows just how to, like, get him to just smile. And they have such a bond. And I didn't have that growing up as a child with my dad. So seeing them interact, at the point I'm like, dang, I wish you were my daddy. Like, and he would laugh and say, you're not serious. But I mean, and my parents did a good job, don't get me wrong, but it was a different time, a different generation. They raised kids differently. So I don't want to think of it like criticizing my parents. They did the best they could, and I'm so thankful for their help in my life. But seeing the way my husband parents my daughter, he's so patient with her. Like, take for example, when she's like screaming and she's in a mood, I just walk away because I'm like, I ain't dealing with this nonsense. I just want to walk away because it's so much for me. My husband runs towards the chaos and just coops her up and I'm like, I could do that. That could actually work. Again, he says the kind of person he is because I was the trauma. He came running towards me to kind of save me in a way. So I'm learning just how to be patient with her and not lose my cool and ignore her, but learn how to because if you hug a child, and my daughter is she's so easily forgiving. Like, you just hold her and just, pet her. She's good. And she forgives easily. She doesn't hold a grudge, which I love about her. And I hope, Ari, you keep that trait because it's one of the things we love about you. You're so easy to love and you're always loving. And so when the time came to adopt, my husband was the first to say yes. I'm like, what happened to you? I thought you said you wanted to just foster. And as at that point, I knew my husband as a friend, a lover, a brother, an uncle, a nephew, a cousin, a son. But because of the challenges we had, I could never see him as a father. But seeing this, I'm like, man, when you think there's enough sexiness to a man, this is like another layer. And I'm thankful to be able to see it. And it's so humbling because this was something I felt like I could have deprived him of, in a way. And he's so graceful about it. He's so level-headed. He's a strong provider, but he's also gentle with her and he's very present. Even though he works crazy hours, by the time he's home, And so learning to co-parent together and also heal some of my own trauma through this. Because for a child in the system, remember they have their own trauma, but you don't want your own trauma to be colliding with yours because you are the adult here, right? And so having to expose all of my trauma out and start working on them. So I've been in therapy where, I have like 2 therapists now, retainers, and I always laugh because of my daughter, because I'm trying to do the work because I don't want to. I know some things I can't shield her from, but as long as I'm able to work on some things, I'm in therapy for that. So yeah, my life wasn't the way I wanted it to be, but it's a better script. Because there's no way I could have scripted it. And every time I look at her like, man, God really loves us. And that's how we named that Ari Feolua. It means we've seen the love of God. And the Ari part is actually, there's a Korean bit to it, which means, love as well, God's love. So, and it complements the Yoruba speaking part of me, which is Nigerian, one of the languages speaking in Nigeria and also my tribe. Because she's beloved. Like, you see her, you love her. I mean, God has to love, because there's no way I could have auto-suggested her to come into of all the houses. Because remember, I kept this caseworker on hold for like many hours. I even forgot about the call. She could have gone to another family and our story would have been different. But I'm thankful I said yes. This was the best yes I ever said in my life. Apart from saying yes to my husband, that is. Because she's brought so much joy. There's a way a child loves you. She loves your broken pieces. She looks at you like you're the best thing in the world. And I needed that. I didn't know how much I needed that healing until I started looking at her and then realizing that, man, to be called your mom, this is great. I mean, I've done great things in my life. I've accomplished a lot of success in my professional life. But being a mom means a lot to me more than any other title I will ever have. Because it's a life you're impacting. And you're part of that story. And so our lives our story started in a way we have, first parents. And like a relay, we took the baton and we're going to continue from here. And I know she's going to do great things. I'm just happy you started with us.
So during the foster period, did she ever leave and then come back? No. So
she'll have visitations. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like she's just been with you until you had the opportunity to say.
Yes. And she was here for 688 days. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she'll go have visitations. We have parents and then she'll come back, because they allowed that. Mm-hmm. But she's always there.
Oh, wow.
The night she didn't spend at our house was maybe when she spent it with our friends. When we're out of town, we couldn't take her with us. Because of some trips that we couldn't take her with us. Like when we went on our, wedding anniversary trip to Jamaica, we wanted to just be both of us. Excuse me. She couldn't go with us, but most of the time she was always with us. Like, I mean, all of it, all but those few times when we were out of town, like for trips. Yeah, every night. Yeah.
Tell me about the first time she called you mom. What did she call you?
Mama. But she said Dai first. She said call it Dai. Said Daye. Dai. Oh. And I'm like, you little Judas, I'm the one spending all this time at home with you. And then you open your mouth and Tyler would never let me get away with that. Like, he's always reminding people, like, she said, girls now, those little betrayals. But she said, Dai first, and then she said, Mai. And then Mama. Now she said, Mama. And when she was like, Mama. And she's so cute. Like, you're like, just take the keys to the kingdom. It's all yours, But she said, Dai first, and then she said, Mai. I'm like, what did she say? I was like, what? Mai? Of course, she had to say it again. She doesn't say it again. And she said it again. And then my husband heard it. Like, oh. But it was like maybe 2 weeks later or so after she said Dai. Oh, yeah. But yeah, that, like, I mean, it's just a word. Like, how many letters? But it makes a world of a difference because before then, people have been calling me, Ari's mom, the name, we had a nickname for her, Beloved. And they say Beloved's mom, but it never registered to me because I'm like, well, she still has her first mom. Like, guys, let's be careful here. I don't want to, I'm just a foster mom. Like, no, you're not just a foster mom. Because at 11 months, all she knew was us. At the point where she remembers her first mom because I've gone on one of the visits. I could see the way she engaged with her mom. You could tell that her body remembered. But from then to now, well, all she knows as parents, right? And so having to embrace all of that while acknowledging and honoring her first parents, because if they didn't make a choice to keep her alive at the time we got her, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So I honor them for that. Yeah. But
I just want to know, when you're going through that process of, I guess, the opportunity to adopt, what were your emotions then? Because can things just change suddenly? You know what I mean?
Can things just change? Of course. Of course. And again, one of the big things I'm big on is communities. The way I formed community with you, by the way, which I thank you so much, by the way. You're part of my podcast's community, my African connection, and I love what you do. Love what you do. I have communities for different areas of my life. I've already, outsourced them out. I have communities for fostering and adoption. And yes, stories, true. People will have a child for 4 years and then they have to go back to the other parents. Imagine 4 years. And this work is not easy. Again, it's not for the faint-hearted. Imagine pouring it's honorable work. Don't get me wrong. But as humans, there's an expectation you have. And even when that thought started, and it wasn't us even dreaming about it, the caseworkers approached us like, it's possible it's going to go towards termination of the parental rights. Would you guys be open to adopting her out? Otherwise, she has to go back in the system and have another, family, take her in. And I'm like, I don't think I want this girl going back in the system anymore. If her parents are not able to get her back, of course it has to be us, right? But when they told us that and when it finally happened was, I want to say, a year and something, like 1.5 years. And this is short, by the way, because these things can prolong for as long as 7 years. Because when you go to court, the judge just says, adjourn 6 months later. And I'm like, we just met for like 10 minutes, adjourning for 6 months. Like, what are you people doing here? But you have to be patient because for a parent losing their parental rights, it's not something easy to do. You can't rush it. Because it's not about you as a foster parent. It's about the child and what's best for the child. And it has to be done very thoughtfully. And sometimes do I think the court gets it right? Yes. But sometimes they don't do a good job because they take those kids back to those environments that are not safe. And for me, I'm prone to anxiety because I have perfectionist tendencies when things don't go that way. And my anxiety was so off the roof. Because of the time that because we kept praying for her first parents. Like we'll pray for her, pray for, the dad as well. But I won't lie to you, there was a part of me that was praying that I hope you dropped the ball. So I had to speak to God about that part. Like, I need to be able to pray for her and just pray that, she gets her act together, whatever that might mean. And it's okay for me to feel like I want to keep her, because me wanting to keep her will mean she has to drop the ball. So having to like understand those two truths, not like I was wishing her evil. We were actually really praying that she, turns a good leaf and all of that kind of stuff. But man, there was a time that my anxiety was just as high, and my daughter could feel it. She could, how they say children can feel it, because she was just exceptionally clingy to me. Like, she was just going to give me a hug, and I'm like, is this girl read? And my therapist was like, yes, they can read your vibe when you're off. So yes, a lot can go off, and there are many times we thought we're going to lose her, and I use that word carefully, but when that time came, and I remember when the rights were terminated, I cried, Julia. I cried for the parents, because as an African, you know how blood is everything. This is somebody's mom. She gave birth to this child. You're telling me that a judge can just pronounce some words and it's all done and null and void? Really? But she gave birth to this child. Like, how dare they? I had that tigers come out in me. And I think the part that broke me was when they would read the rights and say, are you sure you know what this means? You cannot inherit anything through her. That inherits. Just almost like, wow, like this is for real. Like they cut ties like that. Like, really? So I got to a point where, and this was God really helping me. There's something the Holy Spirit told me. Do you think you love this child more than I love her? And that was humbling, because no matter how much parents love their kids, God loves them more. And I think I'm glad I started parenting through this way, because it taught me how to be intentional. Most people didn't know we even had a child, because we couldn't talk about her publicly. So we had to be very intentional about her. We couldn't just talk about her story anyhow. I couldn't put her pictures on Facebook, on social media. It was like a beautiful thing that was only known to people around us. And that we needed that, Imagine if parenting was done that way, where it was only the community that mattered. You didn't have to involve social media and all that. It's why even till today, you probably will not see a lot of how my social media pages, because I want to protect that. I'm not saying people that put their kids on Facebook are doing the wrong way. But for me, it had to teach me how to be more intentional. And also that concept of our children don't belong to us. Man, the government let me know that every time I went to court. Because if you think, you have arrived, no, they remind you this child is not yours. And on a deeper level, even when you birth a child, they are not yours. They don't belong to you. You're only custodians of them. And fostering taught me that, because there was no way I could have gotten to know that on my own naturally, because I'm very possessive. I occupy land and mass. That's who I am. I go into a room, I own it. That's the most touch. Everything I touch is just, it reeks of more. But not this child, And I still see myself as a custodian, even though it's legal now. But I thank God every day. If I ever doubt God's love for my life, I look at her and I'm like, there's no way. She's a constant reminder of that. And now that she's growing, she's talking, her personality is shining through. She has a love for people. Everywhere she goes, even in her daycare, they talk about how she's taking care of the little ones. They love her at daycare. We belong to a gym. She's like a natural born leader. And I'm not taking credit for that, but I know there has to be a God somewhere, because he is strategically picked her for us. And I say that carefully because I know that, her parents, lost their rights to her and all that. But I don't know what the future might be like, and we leave that conversation open. She's always going to know the truth about where she came from. And the older she gets, the more she will know the truth. And there could be two truths. Your parents loved you, and I believe they did, and they still do, but they couldn't take care of you. And here's why. And that story will be open to her more and more as she grows older. We're not going to hide anything from her. And thankfully for us, there's no way you can hide, because she looks nothing like us. So yeah, it's a beautiful life, too. This is just, it has to be my life, because sitting turns and the twists and the plots and the tropes and the dramatic, cliffhangers and all that. But I thank God every day I see her. Like, she's made my relationship with Jesus deep, especially exploring anxiety and my worries. And so have I arrived? No, I'm still working through therapy, because parenting is a whole totally different beast. I want to be very intentional. I want to make sure she's affirmed. I want to create a safe space for her. I want to make sure she knows that whatever she wants to do, she can achieve it. I want her to feel secure because adoption is a grief. Let's be very honest about it. Adoption is a grief. No matter how best environment we're giving her, there's a grief she has to contend when she grows older. Asking herself, why couldn't my parents keep me? And I'm equipping we're equipping ourselves to be able to deal with that question. I never want her to doubt her self-worth. I want her to be very open about asking those questions. Because for one, I have always struggled with my self-worth. I've struggled with, just so many aspects of my life, being abused as a child and also going through infertility issues. I doubt myself sometimes, like just how worthy I am. And I know that even working through that, by the time she's older, I will have more answers because I want this to be as open as possible. There's no, whatever your murky questions are, Arife, there's no questions I'm not able to navigate with you. I might not have all the answers, but I hope you can always ask them. So that's the kind of parent I want to be. To talk about things, because our parents couldn't do that. For whatever reason, they couldn't do that. They did the best they could do because a lot of them came from a very impoverished background. So their number one key was to put a roof over our head and put food on the table. And I'm glad they did that because I'm able to do more than that now. I'm able to be more emotionally present. And it only gets better. I'm not going to be the best parent ever. I will make mistakes. I will say the wrong things. I will do the wrong things. But my parents have done a lot. My job is to do a little bit better than that. You have great questions, Chulu. Look at the way I'm just like the things I've said today. I have never quite pieced them together. Jeez, what did you do? Did you just press something on the mic?
Listen, I have like you just let me go. Other questions, but go. We just gonna have to come back.
We should come maybe do a live show or something. Come back because there's so many things I'm not able to talk about.
So many other questions, but I'm like, girl, I need to wrap this up.
Yes, okay. Let's wrap it up. Yeah.
All right.
No, seriously, great question, Shulu. And I love your patience. You let us just have it. It's a great question. You're a great host. Thank you so much.
You guys, may I can talk to more for a long time, right?
No, true. Let's do that. You know how to do like 4-hour marathon shows? We can talk about everything. Seriously. Set it up for a Saturday. I'll be there. There's so much you can talk about.
Okay, great question. How do we support you? Where do people find you? Is there anything you want support in at the moment? Like, what are you working on? Because you're always working on something. Is there like No. So what are you doing?
I haven't talked about this yet because I'm still working on it. So for my birthday in October, I always try to do a cause. There's sometimes I raise money for education. This year I want to raise money for women who might want to like for their reproductively challenged like me. Especially those that might want to undergo surgery for like fibroids or freeze their eggs. So I'm setting up a board of trustees to go through the applications and choose the worthy recipients. Ideally, I want people that are 35 and over because I'm going to be 36 this year. So, because I know that with older women, there's that desperation and people start chiming into your ears, your biological clock is ticking. I have my biological clock on one end of the spectrum and my 10-year clock. So it's like chiming away like a Vecna piece. But I want to raise funds for that. So you can follow me on Instagram at MOSIBYL. I also have that podcast, the More Sibyl Podcast, which I host with my wonderful co-host, Dr. Yomide, every Thursday. And we explore stories of Blacks, Asians, and those who love them. It's in its 5th season. We have almost 200 episodes. So you can catch up with the podcast or follow me on Instagram to kind of find out what I'm up to. But if you, at the very least, just listen to the podcast or even subscribe to it or share with your friends. Support that cause. I'll be launching it soon to see how we can support women, especially in African countries where we have low resources. And I'm at a place where I have money to do great things. And when I was a student, I didn't have a lot of money. And if it hasn't worked for me, I would like to put a smile on someone's face, be a blessing to someone. So yeah.
No. I love you. I love you so dearly. Thank you.
You're amazing. Like, oh my goodness. We need more women like you in Africa. And I'm so glad to have met you. You're a great woman. You're very intentional. And I know this is your podcast, but please allow me to, give something back to you. You're very intentional. So Chulu's group on WhatsApp. Okay. Number one, I don't like WhatsApp groups. I can count how many groups I am on WhatsApp, but Chulu's Africana group on WhatsApp, no, I cannot miss it. She has managed, guys, to build an arsenal of strong Amazonian women across Africa doing great things. We have Chulu there. We have the great Akego. We have Adele. We have people. I'm like, Chulu, Chulu is the one ring that binds us all, and she's intentional. And this is something Chulu does. I don't know how she does. Maybe she has like our names on Google. Anything, something pops up, she knows what we're celebrating. I mean, how does Chulu even know all the people? She'll go and bring their post on Facebook or Twitter, wherever, and tag it on the group. Let's congratulate this person. I mean, Chulu is so intentional. She doesn't have to do all these things, though. I know she's busy with her brand and her, her podcast and her retreats. But Chulu, I mean, what you do is so great. I don't know if you hear that a lot, but you're awesome. And please keep being who you are. I know your heart is there because it's not a flash in the pan. You're very intentional. And I've learned a lot of that from you, of just being very, there for people and even getting us together despite our busy schedules and not giving up. Thank you for what you do. Really, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We're ending this podcast now.
I'm not the longest guest you have on the show. Oh, you see, this is why you might be on a good day because I'm gonna come from. This is Chulu's podcast. Hey, she has to have the best of me, so I came ready.
Right?
I didn't think much about it because I didn't want to overthink him. I'm just gonna say I didn't think about the questions. And we didn't even have questions sent beforehand. So, but I'm glad to have this conversation with you. But please, let's do that live show. I don't mind staying 4 hours and just talking about everything and nothing with you. It'll be fun. It'll be a dream come true, actually. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, my darling.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I held back my tears as we recorded this episode. But I cried. I cried when I was editing. First of all, Mo, thank you. You need to hear me say this to you. Thank you. You are a master storyteller. Thank you for painting a picture so vividly and vulnerably of your life experiences. Girl, you said so much that I will have to come back and revisit over and over again. You articulated the nuances and complexities of what it means to be a human in a way that is so relatable. I can see why you teach. What a beautiful gift. Whilst the path has not always been easy for you, I believe that your story will be a blessing to so many women. Thank you, Mo. I love you so much. I'm not going to say much more, because she said it so beautifully. We actually have a space where we discuss each episode in depth each week. So if you want to have a deeper conversation with fellow African women, come on over and join the Africana Women Visionaries. All you have to do is visit africanawoman.com to become a member. I think it's great to hear these stories on the podcast and you say, yeah, I can relate to that. But your healing journey goes even further when you can speak out loud about your thoughts, your impressions and emotions. So shout out to all the ladies in Africana Women Visionaries. I love you guys so much. At Africana Woman, we give our guests their roses right now. Please find Mo on Instagram at More Sibyl. Tell her you heard her on the Africana Woman podcast. Take a screenshot of the episode and tag us. We want to keep the conversation going. The mission of Africana Woman has always been to tell more African women's stories. One of the ways that we are doing this is by helping you start your own podcast. If you have a burning idea and are interested in launching a podcast, but you don't know where to start, contact us at africanawoman@gmail.com. Your story is so important. My playground is Instagram, so find me at Chulu by Design. Tag me, tell your friends about the Africana Woman podcast. And again, leave a review, especially on Apple Podcasts, because that helps us spread the word about this show to more African sisters out there. So talk to you soon. This has been a production of Africana Woman Media.